the number one purpose of the podcast is for the guests to be relatable, because I want you to be listening and to say, that's me, because that is super healing. Hi, you're listening to The Rare Life. I'm your host, Madeline Cheney, and today I am celebrating the 1 year mark of those two things: the rare life existing and the absolute privilege that it's been to be the host and creator to this beautiful thing. 1 year ago, on May 29th, on Kimball's second birthday, I launched the biggest, scariest thing that wasn't one of my children. It really is an incredible thing to celebrate and to feel grateful for. And in honor of it, I want to share today kind of behind the scenes of the podcast. We talk a lot about the intimate details of my experiences with Kimball and all of his medical needs and kind of navigating that. But, I do talk very little about where medical mom meets podcaster, and that's a huge part of my life. So I'm really excited to kind of share that and to kind of part the curtain and what that has been like for me, kind of the backstory. So back in the first year of Kimball's life, which I talk a lot about because it was hell. It was so hard. And in the midst of that, I had a friend, and she was pregnant at the same time as I was with Kimball. She was pregnant with her son, Brennan. He was due like 2 months after Kimball, and it was fun to be pregnant together. And then just a week before he was supposed to be born, he died. And it was really, really heartbreaking, obviously, for them and for all of us that knew them. And from that, they created a podcast called Still a Part of Us. And I've mentioned it before in a previous episode, but that is a podcast where they interview other parents who have lost their children either to stillbirth or infant loss. And they really tell these stories of heartbreak in a really real way. And I listened to it when she launched it, and it was heartbreaking. Obviously, it was pretty hard to listen to. But I remember at a certain point in one of the mom's stories I was listening to, and I think they were talking about when she was pregnant, finding out that their child would not survive birth because of some birth defects. And, listening to that, I felt this moment of understanding and being like, oh my gosh, that's not the same as my story, but it felt close enough that it was really meaningful to hear her talk about that and to hear the emotion in her voice and to feel like it reflected my own experience to some degree where we didn't know if Kimball would live or not. And then she went on with her story, and fortunately for us, the stories ended up differently, but that really stuck with me. I was like, wow, that felt really good. That felt really good in a heartbreaking way to be able to relate on that level. At this point, I also was not in any kind of community with, the medical world or special needs world. I was feeling so isolated, and I was like, I really liked that. And I was telling Justin about it later that night, about that experience. And I was like, man, they should have a podcast like that for us. That felt so good. That moment of like feeling that connection and that relatability. Wouldn't that be cool if there was a podcast just for us where I could relate on so many different levels than just that moment? And he was like, yeah, that sounds really cool. And I had this like thought dance into my mind. It was one of the scariest thoughts I've ever had. And I plucked up the courage to voice it to Justin. And I was like, Justin, what if I made a podcast like that? Saying that out loud was so scary, just saying those words. And we both laughed about it and went to bed because it was such a ridiculous idea. But that little seed was planted in my heart, and it stayed there for about a year. And I started doing trauma therapy called EMDR, and I actually interviewed my therapist about that trauma therapy because it was so successful for me and it helped me kind of get past a lot of trauma that we'd experienced with Kimball. And if you haven't heard that episode, I really recommend going back and listening to it. It's back in season 2, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes so you can go check that out. But I did that therapy and I was able to work through my trauma in a way that I was able to get past it. And I started feeling like myself again for the first time in 2 years because, ever since we found out Kimball had any kind of physical issues when I was pregnant with him, that sent me into a spiral that I hadn't really recovered from, and it had been one thing after another in those months. And so being able to kind of get past it and work through it and help my brain reprocess it, I felt like myself again. And I felt happy again. And I was so renewed by this healing that I'd had in a way that it made me want to help other parents experience that healing. And it was kind of interesting because, you would think my mind would be like, oh, I need to go tell everyone about EMDR because that's where I was able to receive this healing. But I also knew the power of connecting with other people who relate with you and the power of hearing someone else's story and being able to relate with it and the power of telling your own story. I knew that those are also very, very healing. And so that little seed that had been planted, a year before kind of sprang up and I was like, oh, that podcast idea, like maybe I could do that. And it still was a really scary idea. It was so scary because it's kind of a big deal. Like I had never created anything like this before. And I knew nothing about recording equipment and editing skills and graphic design to announce the episodes and the skill of interviewing and getting past the fear of recording myself talking like I am right now. Like there were so many hurdles and I wasn't quite sure if I was capable of overcoming those, but I really, really, really wanted to do it. And I felt this fire start within me, this fire of wanting to help other parents who have gone through similar things as I have, and some even worse. And when I was kind of formulating this and brainstorming, I talked to my brother-in-law, Jake. He coaches influencers, so speakers, life coaches, people like that, like really cool people. And I was talking to him about it and I was like, well, I mean, I want to do this big thing, but Kimball's not even 2 yet at this point when I was planning it. So I was like, I am by no means an expert and I'm still in the thick of it. And so I don't know if I have the qualification to do something like this. And he told me there are 2 kinds of influencers. There are the influencers that are 20 years past it and they're speaking from expertise and their learned experience and more of a teacher role. And he said, and then there's the other kind of influencer, and that is the person who is still in the thick of it, in their journey, and they say, hey, come with me through my journey. Come with me and let's learn together. And he said, you would be that kind of influencer. And I was like, that sounds pretty cool. Like, that sounds way cool. I love that. And, there is like definitely some merit to both kinds of people, especially in the medically complex parenting world where there are people who are awesome and saying, hey, I was there 20 years ago. Let me show you all the things I've learned. That's awesome. And then there's me where I'm in the middle of it and I'm saying, hey, come with me through this journey. And that has definitely been the case. I've definitely been experiencing my journey while podcasting. And it's been a really cool way to experience that journey. There's definitely been some struggles too, though. Like last October, many people, especially if you follow me on Instagram, know that I had my 4th miscarriage. And I've had a really hard time with that. And well, to be frank, I'm kind of stuck there. I'm going back to my therapist right now to kind of work through that because in that half year since then, I haven't felt like myself. That grief has been kind of cropping up and I felt less motivated and I got behind in my episodes because I like to record ahead. And so, there are definitely things like that. Or, when we found out that Kimball's cervical spine wasn't doing so well and that he might have an emergency, huge surgery, where that also threw me off my track and trying to like interview people and record and edit and all of it. It's been a huge challenge to keep my head above water in creating this and creating episodes and keeping it afloat while also dealing with, some really hard things that are part of that journey. And I also acknowledge that this podcast has given me so much meaning and something else to focus on when I'm kind of in the throes of grief. And so in that way, it has been really cool. But, it's definitely been a mixed bag of really awesome and kind of sucky at times when I just want to like go watch movies every night and I can't. I need to keep up with my episodes. So, that's been really interesting to experience it that way. And, there have been a lot of times when a guest would say something and it would really hit home for me. And, I'm learning right along with you. And that's been such an honor to be taught as I'm going through these things by listening to other people's experiences and professionals' wisdom. And again, it's been a very neat way to experience the journey. And I'll say too, that there's a lot of realness. I talk a lot about how I like to keep things real and raw and vulnerable. But like, there's a lot of times too where I've had to edit out my kids, being loud in the background because I do this after bedtime and they're in the next room over. And so I have to go through and like edit out each time Wendy's calling out for me. Or the time when I was interviewing someone about CDPX1, my son's syndrome, and he started vomiting while we were recording. I had to stop and go help him and clean him up because that's a part of his syndrome. And so, again, that goes along with the whole living through the journey while talking about it, podcasting about it. And, I'm right there with you in the trenches. And in a lot of ways, that's really cool. In some ways, it's sucky, but in a lot of ways, it's really cool because I think I'm able to relate with each of my guests in a really deep way as we experience these kind of things together. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go back to my story. So I talked to my brother-in-law Jake, and he told me about the two kinds of influencers, and we've established that I am the kind that is going through the journey. I've given you proof. So there was so much fear. So I worked on this, like kind of formulating and planning for a few months. And then I started recording for a few months before I actually launched the podcast because I knew I couldn't do this unless I was a lot of episodes ahead. And that is, again, because I'm going through this right now and I don't trust my life enough to be able to do them week by week as they're released and be consistent. And plus, I love structure. If you know me well, you know I love structure. So in these months leading up, there was so much fear. In the very beginning, there was fear in each step of like telling people about it. And the first step was, telling Justin, my husband. I felt this fear in saying it out loud. And then I felt this fear this time my best friend came over and she had traveled all this distance because we'd moved away from each other and she traveled all this distance so we could see each other. And we went and got milkshakes and French fries because that's what you do. And we were there and I was like, oh, I need to tell her. Because I'd been planning it. I was like, I need to do this. And I was like, Kendra, I want to make this podcast. And it felt so scary. It felt so scary to say it out loud. And we talked about it and it was exciting. But after she left, I felt a little sick because there's always this fear of like, but what if I don't do it? What if I'm not strong enough to do this? What if I'm not capable of doing something like this? And what if it becomes one of those big, ambitious dreams that I've dreamt up and then I don't follow through with? And I think that is the fear that I felt each time I told someone or each time I took a big, scary step forward, like buying my microphone and recording equipment. Like, but what if I back out? But what if I stop working on it and these things just kind of get put in the garage because I didn't follow through? And, and then I told other friends and then I posted it on Facebook. That was a big deal. So each of these steps was full of fear, but each time I was overcoming this fear and pushing forward and moving towards that big launch date, I was proving to myself that I really could do something like this and I could trust myself to follow through on a dream. And, that right there has changed me a lot. That newfound confidence that I am capable of chasing a dream that I come up with. Because I love to dream big and I have ambition, but a lot of things that I've dreamt about, I didn't end up doing. And so this was a way that I guess I was able to prove to myself that I was able to do it. So Kimball's birthday came and I launched the podcast, obviously, and it has been amazing, as I already kind of was talking about, but it's been amazing to experience Kimball's journey while doing this podcast. And, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm a full-time mom, which means, here's your behind the scenes, which means I get up at 5 in the morning before the kids wake up and I work on my podcast, and then, then I'm a mom, and then it's nap time, which is really quiet time. And I work like a mad woman during their nap time. And then the precious hour comes when it's their bedtime. Like right now, it is bedtime and I'm recording. And that's usually when I interview people too. And I work like a mad woman until I get my bubble bath and go to bed. So, once a week I watch a movie. And that, I don't tell you that to try to make you feel guilty or like pity me, but just to show you like my heart is in this. This is something I believe in so much. It's something I believe in so much that I give up sleep for it and nap times for it and bedtimes for it. And I don't get to go watch all the TV shows or, whatever people normally do after the kids go to bed. And it's a lot. It's a lot. It is a lot. It's a lot of work and it's hard work and sometimes heartbreaking work, especially with people who have heartbreaking stories to tell. And it is thrilling work. It is exhilarating, especially when I get messages from listeners that tell me about how much it's impacted them and how it's made them feel less alone and help them process things. Like, what an honor. What an honor. And these friendships that I've been able to make with the guests that come on. It is, I feel like I have the most amazing circle of friends from this. And, those are things that I've worked really hard for and I'm really grateful for. I try not to sugarcoat things, and that's why I'm telling you how much work it is. But, there's nothing quite like the best way I can explain it is Twitterpation, Bambi style, just being so in love after I have like a really great interview and I run downstairs to tell Justin, or after someone says that they'll come on the show and I'm just so thrilled and just giddy. There are definitely really high highs and some pretty low lows of frustration when things don't work. And, it's just hard. So it's been an awesome, crazy year of growth and it's just been a thrilling experience. So I also want to point out too, you may notice I try really hard to have guests that are just regular people. And there's a reason for that. I'm very intentional about that because I really believe that if you look close enough to any experience and any story, any parent child relationship, and the lessons they've learned, they are incredibly meaningful and super impactful from anyone. Like, you pick anyone in the medically complex world, or probably anyone anywhere, but specifically there, since that's what we talk about. And you really can find amazing moments of connection and amazing moments of pain and struggle and triumph. And it kind of floors me. Like, I feel like I really, truly could interview anyone and we could have an awesome episode. And that is one reason that I share my story in the solo episodes. I don't think I'm anything exceptional. I don't think Kimball and our situation is anything unique than anyone else's. I just know that when you zoom way in on someone's life and their experiences, it's meaningful. It's super meaningful. And I also there's another part of that too. I love having just kind of the regular Joes on because it's so relatable, right? And that is the number one, purpose of the podcast is for the guests to be relatable, for all the episodes to be relatable, because I want you to be listening and to say, that's me. That is me. I've felt exactly what she is saying, and she gets it, and I get her, because that is super healing. And that can dispel crippling isolation. That is what I'm after. And as I was doing research about podcasting, one of the big gurus in podcasting said, podcasts are the best way to scale intimacy. And I love that because it truly is. Like, you really can feel like you're just sitting in the room with the people talking, and like you really are there. And I really hope that's what you feel, because I think that goes right along with the relatability, and having that connection is feeling like you are there with us. And what a cool thing to combine with, special needs parenting. That intimacy and feeling like you're right there with us, because, it is very isolating in so many ways. And so, hearing someone's voice as they tell their story and hearing the emotion is just, it's so powerful. And in the next episode, you'll hear an interview with Mom Catherine Acton, and she's on social media very little. And you probably notice that most of my guests I get through Instagram. That's kind of how I select people, because I'm able to like read what they're talking about and be like, oh, they would be a great fit. And so I was like, yeah, this is kind of interesting for me because like I know so little about you. And she was like, oh, that's so funny, because I feel like I totally know you, because she's a listener. And I was like, I love that. That is so cool. And I hope that I'm a friend to you. I hope that you feel like I'm your friend, because I wish that we each could be best friends. I really do. And I think this is a really cool way to kind of like feel like we are. Anyway, that was like super cool to me. So I have this analogy of kind of my purpose for this podcast, and especially in being really real about our experiences and not sugarcoating things or beating around the bush or just talking about the inspirational or just the diagnoses. I have this image in my head of this giant gymnasium, this huge gym. And I picture there being tons of these black curtains that kind of divide it up into little cubicles, hundreds of little cubicles. And I imagine each of us experiencing, medically complex parenting, rare parenting, each in our own little cubicle, and feeling so alone and just hurting and just crying and just being really heavy with all of it. And a lot of times, especially, in that first year before I was able to really find connection with other parents who got it, like, and even sometimes now, it's easy to feel like I'm the only one. It's easy to feel like I must be the only one struggling, especially when no one talks about it. And, I must be the only one heartbroken about my son's struggles. And I must be a monster for wishing he didn't have this. And, just all of these deep, dark places that we go. And I imagine so many people each in their own divided up cubicle feeling the exact same way, like feeling like, man, no one knows what this is like. No one else must be experiencing this. This is so hard. And then I picture that with my podcast, that I'm kind of lifting that curtain with my solo episodes where I talk about that stuff. I'm lifting the curtain and saying, hey, look at me. I'm struggling. Look at me. I struggled with this. And this is what I was thinking and feeling. And then with each one, I get messages of people saying, yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. And I feel like that's kind of like them also getting the courage to kind of part that curtain a little bit and be like, oh, I see her struggling and suffering. Hey, I am also. And then with every guest that I have on, I picture kind of helping them part their curtain as well and showing more people another person who's also struggling and having a hard time. And, kind of the ripple effect that can have as we each part our curtain. And maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you're holding on to that curtain. You don't want anyone to see, but you can at least see other people's struggles and suffering and know that you're not alone in your little cubicle. And of course, I think of this specifically in our sphere, but of course, this relates with so many things in life that various people struggle with. It could be mental illness, it could be infertility, it could be anything. And I think when we part that curtain and we have the courage, we could really help people. And there's a lot of healing in it too, because inevitably other people kind of part their little curtains a little bit to say, yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. And that has been amazing because there's been some solo episodes that are like really personal, especially the one about being a carrier back in season 2, like so personal. And I truly felt like no one else must have felt exactly how I was feeling. But do you know, I got so many messages about that one. I got so many because I think that was a curtain no one else was willing to part, or at least nowhere that I'd seen or they had seen. And again, I just think there's so much power in parting that curtain. And that is what this podcast is. It is parting those curtains and healing because of it and finding connection and community because of it. So I want to read a message I got. I've gotten so many awesome messages, but this one was truly, I felt it change me. Those moments when you're just like, whoa, I just changed for the better. It was really impactful. So I want to read it to you and, kind of show this mom's experience with that parting of the curtain, so to speak. Maddie, I just want to let you know how grateful I am for your podcast. I found myself saying things out loud to you or the person speaking and crying because it all resonated with me so deeply. I'm sure it's been a huge sacrifice to make the podcast, but thank you for doing it. I feel like it's aided in my own healing. When Sam was a baby, I felt for years that my body broke his body. I couldn't shake it, and I'd never heard anyone else talk about that. Anyways, I can't thank you enough. I hope we can talk soon. So this mom's son is 14 years old. And to hear that she was able to find further healing and kind of processing of her experience because of the episodes and the guests, like that that was, I mean, like, just so meaningful. Like, holy cow, like that right there, that one person, it made everything worth it, the whole podcast, even if it were just for her. And I really hope that, you felt something like that before in listening. And I'm just so grateful for each of you. I know it sounds really cheesy, but like I picture each of you. Each listen means so much. And obviously, this would not be a thing without my dear listeners to make it a thing and to make it this awesome community. And I am so grateful for each of you. So, this kind of leads me into an ask because, each episode produced is very timely and costly. And I did the math, it's about $160 an episode. And there are a lot of episodes. So that's just not really sustainable with my time and funds alone. And obviously, this podcast needs to keep going. Like, it's just getting started. We need to keep this going and, spread it to the world, get it to as many people as possible. And so I have a couple of ways for you to, there's a lot of ways to support, but I have a few ideas for you for today to kind of help me continue to produce awesome content and healing and connecting content, curtain parting content. So, number one idea is donating on Patreon. And I know that is kind of boring, but that really, really helps mitigate the costs. And like I say, it's just not sustainable how it is going right now. And so, Patreon is just a forum for you to donate. So there's a link in the show notes. You just click that and ask you for your information, and you can decide how much to donate. You could do $1, you could do 20. Gosh, you could do 50 if you're feeling really generous. But I do encourage you to please look into that and to please donate to help this podcast be a thing. And number two idea is actually a super exciting announcement. So if you follow me on Instagram, you probably already know about this and may have even already ordered yours. But I have a little secret. I have created merch with the help of my lovely graphic designer, Lorianne War. I am really excited about it. So there are hoodies and shirts, and they're not your run-of-the-mill hoodies and shirts. These are appointment day clothes. So they are specifically for you to wear to appointments. And those can be medical appointments or therapy appointments. But it says appointment day, we've got this, and then #TheRareLife. And it is my hope and my dream that you will wear these to your child's appointments and feel really empowered. Whether they be little meaningless appointments that are kind of just token appointments, or if they are big, scary ones where you're making decisions and there are more questions than answers. I really hope that you can wear this stuff and feel just that little bit of like, I don't know, a virtual hug from me and from all the other parents that are in our community. And, to know that you're not alone. There's an army of parents that are attending countless appointments all the time. Like, that is just our life. And so I really hope that it gives you a little bit of that. And it also helps support the podcast. Every bit of the profits go towards producing episodes. And so, go check them out. I think they look really good personally. I mean, I'm a little biased, and they've been pretty popular. I've been really, really excited about how many people have loved them and ordered them. So check out the link in the show notes for that for sure. Go check them out and see if there's something you would want to wear. And there are more options coming in the works. So Patreon or buying this awesome merch are two great ways to keep this podcast coming. So kind of in conclusion, it's been an amazing, hard, scary, thrilling journey that has helped me to grow leaps and bounds in the last year. And I'm forever changed by having a front row seat to such amazing humans sharing their deeply raw personal journeys, and then in turn sharing them with each of you. And gosh, I just thank each of you for your continued support and messages and sharing of the podcast. And I thank you in advance for everyone who will donate on Patreon or buy the merch to kind of help keep the episodes coming. And above all, thank you for listening and for allowing my guests and me to be part of your journey. Thank you for an awesome year. You can follow me and get more behind the scenes on Instagram at the_rare_life. Join me next week for the story of Anna with mom and avid listener Catherine Acton. Don't miss it. See you then.